So, what I really want to do a video about is the 5.3 Archon quest or the Movika story quest. But here I am doing another video about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni because the internet is full of misogyny and no one is surprised, but man, am I angry about it. I doubt this video will get much traction, but if you've got your fingers on the keyboard ready to ask me, did you read all the lawsuits? I'll save you the trouble. Yes, I did. And you know what? Baldoni's lawsuit is full of baloney. I'm not here today to talk about everything that I found inconsistent, weird, or suspicious in his lawsuit, though. That would honestly take too long, and I covered a lot of key points from the first lawsuit that are lies, inconsistent, or irrelevant in his lawsuit against the New York Times. You can watch that video via the link in the description. No, today I want to talk about the video footage that his own team released to the public in the midst of a legal dispute that they hope will help them spread a narrative that will harm Lively's reputation and discredit her. This is literally the PR smear campaign Lively spoke about in motion, and man, are people falling for it. I want to talk about how unethical his entire campaign against Blake Lively has been since he filed that first lawsuit, how the video actually makes her case if anybody would actually view it without the very obvious bias against her, how the video additionally proves he lied or at least misrepresented the scenario in his own lawsuit, and how this video is a classic example of how damn hard it is for women to set boundaries and speak their minds at work because of how often men miss or even ignore the signals. I'm not going to go into body language analysis. I'm not about that, and I have no confidence in accurately reading people's body language anyway. But I will speak about how the scenario was presented to us by her, by him, and through the footage. My own interpretation will come up because of the nature of responding to the footage, so there will be bias based on my own experiences. I want to be very honest and transparent about that because true objectivity is a myth, and I'm not about both siding this. I'm about staying focused on the issue of workplace misconduct and sexual harassment and retaliation and the mess that comes with that. So let's begin with how Lively recounted the scenario in her lawsuit. Keep in mind, she seems unaware that the scene was mic'd up and clearly does not claim access to this footage. Her account is based on her memory, so there may be some discrepancies, but what is important to assess is, do these discrepancies contradict any of the key points of her complaint? And her complaint was about a pattern of misconduct and sexual harassment that led to her feeling she was in an unsafe working environment. In her claim, she says, Mr. Baldoni and Miss Lively were filming a slow dance scene for a montage in which no sound was recorded. Mr. Baldoni chose to let the camera roll and have them perform on the scene, but did not act in character as Ryle. Instead, he spoke to Miss Lively out of character as himself. At one point, he leaned forward and slowly dragged his lips from her ear and down her neck as he said, "It smells so good." None of this was remotely in character or based on any dialogue in the script, and nothing needed to be said because, again, there was no sound. Mr. Baldoni was caressing Miss Lively with his mouth in a way that had nothing to do with their roles. When Miss Lively later objected to this behavior, Mr. Baldoni's response was, "I'm not even attracted to you." In the footage, we see that there was a slow dance scene, though the sound was on. Obviously, Lively did not know that. It's also irrelevant to the claim, so I'm just gonna move on. Mr. Baldoni did indeed choose to let the camera roll and have them perform the scene. And he did speak to her out of character as himself. Their exchange clearly shows that. At one point, he did lean forward and slowly drag his lips from her ear and down her neck. He did say, "It smells good," not "it smells so good." To me, that's a discrepancy that I would expect from a recollection not being perfect. So, moving on. As for the later objection, this would of course not be included in the footage. But I will note that she does express discomfort by commenting on her spray tan in a way that suggests she did not like what he was doing and was trying to get him to stop. When he said, "It smells good," she brings up another excuse for him to stop, that being her body makeup. Her discomfort was obvious even without reading too much into her body language. So yeah, I don't think she willfully lied in her complaint about this scene making her uncomfortable or vulnerable, especially because this scene seems to suggest that another one of her claims was correct. There was no intimacy coordinator there to observe. Another claim that she makes is that Baldoni improvised scenes. This video shows the script, which clearly does not list out the actions that he takes. There are no notes about the scene, handwritten or not, as discussed with any intimacy coordinator, and assuming they discussed any of the actions as they would be carrying out, it does seem there are some actions that she took issue with, so they must not have been discussed. Notably, in the footage, he directs her in some parts, but not in others. For example, he does mention when they should do one take, almost like super close, but he does not give her a heads up on how he will be running his lips along her neck or sniffing her. This shows he was actually very inconsistent in how he chose to direct this one scene. We've yet to see any proof of her doing anything other than being very verbal about what she wants to do, indicating she was not averse to discussing what they were doing beforehand. So, this scene lines up with everything she said. On that note, let's get into his account of what was said during this scene in his lawsuit and what the footage shows. And before we begin, I want to point out that his lawsuit's purpose is not only to refute her claims, not that he does that really, he just tries to reframe them, but also to call into question her credibility as a complainant. So he represents her as controlling and uncontrollable, as well as implies she made rude remarks about his body. Yet in the footage, we can see that the things he claims she said are taken wildly out of context. First, Baldoni's lawsuit claims production was filming a romantic montage of Lily and Ryle on their date. One of the producers played music to set the mood so the characters could slow dance. Lively, consistently unable to take direction, insisted she really liked the idea of the characters constantly talking because, as she described, she and her husband liked to keep talking and talking and talking. Baldoni, her director, and the film's assistant director, who were directing the scene, disagreed. In an attempt to encourage her to take direction, Baldoni offered up that he and his wife often just look into each other's eyes silently, to which she responded, like sociopaths, and laughed. Baldoni laughed and shook it off, while Lively once again started talking about how she and her husband can't not talk. Baldoni said, "I think that's cute," and complimented the couple, to which Lively responded, "I think that's more than cute." This is actually a really long description already, so let's just take a look at this part and then do the next. First, the lawsuit claims that she is consistently unable to take direction, but there was no direction given. At no point did anyone tell her to stop talking. In fact, when she says, "I think we should be talking, it would be more romantic if we were talking," Baldoni replies with, "Absolutely." Baldoni is also the first to bring up Blake and Ryan's habit of always talking, not Lively. And he is also the first to talk about how he and his wife will look into each other's eyes for prolonged periods. In fact, he's the one who causes Lively to laugh first, saying, "I think you would find it terrifying." When Lively goes on to say, "I think I found a sociopath," she is clearly following his lead on his joke. Baldoni does compliment Ryan and Blake's relationship by saying, "I think that's cute," and Blake does respond with, "I think it's more than cute." Seems weird. But remember, the context of this scene is she was trying to make a case for how talking would make the scene more romantic. Of course she was going to push back against the dismissive remark that it was just cute. She was speaking professionally, not personally, and Baldoni misrepresents that on purpose to deflect from how he was dismissive of her input, even though he'd invited her previously to give input on any scene anytime she felt. Now, if he was really interested in allowing the women on set to take the lead in portraying Lily's perspective through the female gaze, as he claimed on numerous occasions through multiple interviews, why is he so dismissive of the input Lively is giving in this scene on how to make it more romantic? All right, let's move on to the next paragraph of his description of this scenario. He states, "Lively continued arguing and tried to direct him for the scene, while they were supposed to be in character filming the scene. At some point, Keith and another producer, irritated, called Baldoni aside to express they can't capture the intended shot because Lively wouldn't stop talking. He was instructed to somehow get her to stop. While there was a brief verbal exchange, Baldoni, heeding the instruction of their assistant directors and producers, continued to try to bring them back into character. As they were acting in this montage scene, Lively continued to break character and speak as herself rather than as Lily, which was extremely confusing for Baldoni, who was trying to balance directing the scene with his artistic vision while also acting in character while filming and trying to get Lively to do the same. Lively apologized for the smell of her spray tan and body makeup. Baldoni responded, "It smells good," and continued acting, slow dancing as he believed his character would with his partner, which requires some amount of physical touching. First, yes, Lively is still trying to make her case for talking rather than just dancing in silence. Yes, she also tells him they should start a part of a scene talking, but once again, he was not actually directing her to stop at all. There's literally no indication anyone called him off set to talk to him about getting her to be quiet. And as for his confused state, that has absolutely nothing to do with her because again, he didn't give her any actual direction while supposedly playing this part as director and actor. Lively did apologize for the smell of her spray tan and body makeup, but it was after Baldoni broke character first by saying, "Am I getting beard on you?" It also seems convenient Baldoni left out that this was while he was caressing her neck with his lips, removing the context for why she might have been warning him about her spray tan and makeup, which I discussed earlier. Finally, he ends the description of the scene by saying, "Lively took them out of character again and began to joke about Baldoni's nose, which he laughed off and joked in turn, even as Lively joked that he should get plastic surgery." This was so grossly misrepresented that I have to talk about it. First, Lively did break here, but she only remarked on the action of rubbing their noses together. In fact, what she said was, "I feel so nosy. I mean, it's just noses." That means her nose is involved too. She was not the one who began to joke about Baldoni's nose. He was. He was the first to call it so big. She matched his tone and made a joke about it. And don't even try to tell me she wasn't being sarcastic, even following it up with a "just kidding." And then he brought up Jenny Slate's name for no reason, and Jenny Slate wasn't even there. What I want to know is, if he had this footage when drafting the lawsuit, why all these discrepancies? And why the misrepresentation of her comments? Why take her words out of context, especially when he is supposedly calling her out for taking text out of context? Obviously, it was to set the audience up for a certain interpretation of the footage before they even saw it. They could pick up the sound bites he was throwing down and just ignore the full context of the situation. Speaking of the situation, let's talk about how Lively is dropping hints about her discomfort with his action of caressing her neck, and he is clearly not picking them up. This is where my personal experience as a woman comes in, so my interpretation may not be the conclusion you would initially reach, but hear me out. First, when he says, "Am I getting beard on you?" he is acknowledging there may be an uncomfortable element to that scene. She tries to get him to stop by giving him multiple excuses. Speaking as someone who has had to carefully word my discomfort with others' behavior in a professional setting, I maintain that she was laying down hints that he was not picking up. And rather than owning up to that, he is trying to spread a narrative that she is a liar who never had trouble with him stepping out of line ever. Another possible example of Lively trying to express discomfort is in the account of Heath showing his wife's birthing video. According to this new lawsuit, Baldoni claims Lively, quote, stated she'd like to see it later as she was eating. Oh my God. When I read this, I realized Baldoni and his team either do not or aren't pretending not to understand it when a woman is trying to excuse herself from an uncomfortable situation. Considering that the latest lawsuit lies yet again about how she described the scenario involving the video in her complaint, however, I do think he's just pretending. She did not say she was shown a naked photo. She says that Mr. Heath started playing a video of a fully nude woman, and Baldoni's lawsuit corroborates that claim. If you can't look at the video footage without considering for one moment how things might have felt on Blake Lively's side as an actress working with a director who is not giving her consistent cues for physical contact while performing for a script that his own team has shown no notes about anything they're going to be doing, you are not being objective. You're letting internalized misogyny guide you in scrutinizing her every move while ignoring any and everything he does right before your very eyes. And what he's doing right now is smearing Blake Lively. On January 22nd, Lively's legal team requested a gag order because Baldoni's team has been trying to prejudice the potential jury pool by controlling the media narrative with his recent media tour via television interviews and podcasts, as well as leaked information, including voice notes and video footage. If Baldoni is confident in the litigation process, he should be settling this through the court process. Instead, he is trying to make sure that if a trial with the jury happens, it will be that much harder to find unbiased parties to sit through it all. More people need to notice that that's what's happening, so they aren't fooled by the PR tactics being deployed here. It's so frustrating to see it work even when Lively's team pointed it out to everyone at the start of this mess, and it's only working because of a culture of misogyny that is still very pervasive.